Elevation worship is the best at what they do, probably unequivocally right now, 2024, especially over the last 10 years or so. And then Elevation Rhythm is following suit. And for them to kind of help us to continue our legacy and learn what it even like having a legacy in music even really means.
Yeah. Aren't you a little young to be thinking about legacy?
Yeah.
Sorry.
But that was the main point, was that legacy is not about this long-lasting thing. Legacy is about what you're doing now. Good luck trying to bring a song to its end by yourself. It's rare that it comes out as a quality product that would be better than an otherwise put together by a team song. So Elevation Rhythm, they have a song that's popping off right now. It's called Goodbye Yesterday. They have this bridge.
Big hits.
Decided, and that's kind of the part of the song like everyone kind of waits to get to. The rest of the song is great, but like that hits. That part wasn't originally in the song.
Bro, you went to Elevation?
Yes.
To learn things.
Yes.
And now you wanted to share the things you learned with everybody.
Yes. Yeah, so Elevation, I want to start off by honoring them. So Elevation Church, I know that they are one of the largest churches in the country, and there's a lot of opinions about any church of that size, but what this was, it was called Elevation Legacy, so to speak. And it was a weekend-long songwriting camp put together mainly by Elevation Rhythm, but Elevation Worship was involved in it. And the man behind the plan was David, who runs Elevation Rhythm.
Great name.
Yeah, really cool name. Yeah.
It's like my name, but better.
I was just going to say a cooler version of your name.
Yep.
And it was kind of his baby. The whole point of it was literally to cultivate a weekend specifically there were like 30 of us participants, for us to learn from them and for them to kind of help us to continue our legacy and to learn what it even like having a legacy in music even really means.
Yeah.
And I'm super encouraged.
Aren't you a little young to be thinking about legacy?
Yeah.
Sorry.
But that was the main point, was that legacy is not about this long-lasting thing. Legacy is about what you're doing now, was his point that he was making all weekend.
Yep.
And why I'm so thankful for that is because anyone who's in the church world, Elevation's are really, again, like Elevation worship is the best at what they do. Like probably unequivocally right now, 2024, especially over the last 10 years or so. And then Elevation Rhythm is following suit in the same way, in that of the next generation, the way they're approaching music is really, really well done. They don't have to be doing something like this. If they never did something like this, their legacy would be set. Yeah. And they would go down in history as one of the best people to do it in this time. And yet, they took a whole weekend where they could have been resting, they could have been chilling out, to sow into the next generation of songwriters and producers. And I'm just always really encouraged by people, and we've talked about this before, doing things for people that can't really do anything for you. Like, we had nothing to offer them. We weren't going to do anything for them that they couldn't do themselves. Even if we wrote some songs that they might use or produce some things that they might use, whatever. So I'm really thankful for them in that they just didn't have to do this, but they invested in us anyway. You didn't have to pay for it.
Wow.
You just had to cover your own like travel expenses and like hotel expenses, but they fed us. And we were there, most of the weekend. So it was really cool. Yeah. And a caveat to this episode would be for those of you that maybe you're not a Christian, a caveat to this episode would be we're going to use a lot of language that is very Christian and biblical and scriptural or whatever. And so if you're not a Christian, that's totally fine. I do think you still have much to benefit from this episode, in that a lot of the principles I'm going to share about that I learned that weekend are still applicable to all people, even if you don't subscribe to necessarily following Jesus or whatever. I think they're still helpful to you as a creative. So bear that in mind. But yeah, I really enjoyed this weekend. And I learned a lot, and I was super, super encouraged. Everyone else there was super talented. I didn't know what to expect. But it was it was a really collaborative environment for sure. And so I think I learned a lot. The main thing that I learned creatively wasn't something that was taught necessarily so much as it was something I observed in the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
When you have 30, 20-something-year-olds
Mm-hmm.
who all come together from different places, different environments, different backgrounds, and different levels of skill,
Yep.
they are likely to be, and you're coming to a place where, again, you're going to be seen by people that are really good at what they do. It's very easy for that environment to feel threatening to your confidence and your belief in yourself as a creative. It's very easy to feel like you need to compete with other people and to be jealous of what other people have or whatever. And so I was praying into this weekend weeks before. I was like, man, like I don't want to be jealous and I don't want to be trying to compete. You know, the three, David and I are both threes. So I have a desire to like want to show out and want to be able to display my skills and what I'm capable of in any context, much more a context where there's a bunch of other creatives. And again, we're in front of really talented people. And so immediately in the weekend, you felt this sense of, wow, I don't feel that like at all, like a couple hours in. And that wasn't on accident. That was very intentional, because the way that it was led by particularly David, I'm going to probably brag on him a couple more times, was he led us and shepherded us in such a way that we all felt quite disarmed and felt super valued. And so when I think about jealousy or when I think about trying to compete with other creatives, I think about my own individual responsibility to respect other people and to kind of tame that desire. And that's true. I do still bear that responsibility. And there's an opportunity for those leading something like that to create a culture, even in such a short 2 days, where everyone feels disarmed and everyone feels like they can just be. And I didn't realize that was a cultural thing that you can set as a leader over all the people that you're leading.
Yeah.
And I think the way that, I don't know how intentional this was, like in this area of, concept, but I just know that the way that he made us feel disarmed was like he made everyone feel valued. And he made us get down to our root identities and reminded us that we are first and foremost children of God, and that's the hat that we wear all the time. I'm not wearing my creative hat all the time. I'm not wearing my producer hat or artist hat or songwriter hat all the time. That falls second to and submits to my foremost identity as a child of God. And again, this goes back to my caveat, like you may not relate to this if you're not a Christian, but I do believe that this goes back to the reality for all of us that we need to know where our identity is based on. If you are placing your identity chiefly on your hat as a creator or a musician or artist or whatever, that is shaky ground and it's subject to change and it's inconsistent and fickle, because as everyone knows, some days I feel really good as a creator. Some days I feel like a crappy creator and I have nothing to offer.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, thankfully, that's not my foremost identity. And if I don't do well in that area, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
But if that's where you're putting if that's the basket you're putting all of your eggs in, you're going to crumble and your sense of self-worth and value is going to die really fast.
Well, we see it in like professional athletes.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times is there a great who everybody respects and thinks is amazing at their sport, and they just struggle to let go? They'll retire, they'll come out of retirement, they'll retire, they'll come out of retirement, and then afterwards it's like, what do I do? And the ones that do the best are ones that shift what they do because their identity wasn't in their sport.
Yeah.
It might be in like just who they are as a person, I think, if you're not a Christ follower. And so it's like, like Shaquille O'Neal can still have fun and like a successful career, even though he's not, bodying people in the paint and putting up points,
For sure. And that's like an obvious example that we see publicly, but this can apply to even more general examples, like putting your identity foremost as a husband or a dad. Like that's a beautiful thing, amazing thing. But if something were to happen to your family, or if you weren't doing well in that role, again, your sense of self-worth and value is going to be inconsistent and fickle, and you just don't want that for yourself. So, as a general rule for all artists, I would recommend first and foremost knowing where your identity comes from and placing it in a place that is consistent and not changing. And for me, that is the fact that like as a believer and a follower of Jesus, my identity is always going to be a child of God, and that's not going to change. Not because of my actions, but because of who God is as a loving father, that he never changes, even though I do. So that's that. And so going back to the creative environment thing, focusing on that first set the trajectory for the weekend to go really, really well, because none of us had anything else to prove.
Yep.
And that was a really beautiful thing.
I think even I'm just processing. The first time I heard about all this, your experience, so I'm processing too. I even think when I'm talking to people, it's very easy for me to be really excited about the things that I've done.
Yeah.
And I think like there's like a line between like excited and like bragging.
Yes.
Like wanting people's approval. But somewhere in all of that, it's very easy to want to talk about yourself a lot. And I think one of the most disarming things you can do when you're around other creatives is take more of an interest in what they're doing than trying to push what you're doing onto everybody else. And I think that's where a lot of creatives go wrong. They meet someone, it's like, let me show you all the things I've done and tell you. It's like, no, like get to know what this other person's done, honor them, and whether they're better or worse at their craft than you, they're going to feel instantly disarmed and like willing to collaborate and work with you because you took an interest in what they do.
Yeah, totally. And even that, like you even saying that reminded me of the fact that we all celebrated each other. Like again, starting with like the leadership, starting off really strong, we all felt this desire to be like, dang, like this is awesome. And even if it wasn't necessarily like how I thought, you know, a song should have been written or like produced, it was just easy to celebrate, and that like people in their purest self were expressing themselves through their song, and that was beautiful to watch. Whether it was as quality as I wanted it to be or not. Yeah. So, there's that. At some point in the weekend, shifting topics here, Elevation Worship. So Chris Brown and all of them, they different people. So Elevation Rhythm was there the whole weekend because it was their thing. Yep. And then different people from Elevation Rhythm were in and out, helping out with different things. And then at one point, all of Elevation Worship got together for a panel, which was really awesome. And it was cool to hear from them. And we got to do that little, I don't even know, there's different websites that do this, but where you can submit a question and it'll show up on the screen or whatever. And what's funny is, and this is not a shot, they didn't answer any of our questions on the screen because they were, I feel like, and maybe this is a thing like of the Holy Spirit, I think they were all driving home the same point, which is in tandem with kind of what I was saying earlier. And that's that like, none of this matters as a Christian unless you have a actual relationship with Jesus in the quietest moments of your day where nobody's watching. And again, that goes back to the self-worth thing and, you know, where your value comes from. But it was just cool to hear them say like, hey, you know, what you're seeing on video, you know, if you look up to us in any way, it's not because of anything of ourselves. It's because Jesus has blessed us. This is an overflow of our quiet moments with him, which was really cool to hear. So, and one thing that Chris Brown said was he talked about, and this is just a short moment, but it just stuck with me. He mentioned a verse in the Psalms, probably something of the nature of like David was like, you know, like just in awe, not this David in the Bible, was in awe of like the face of God, and how that like inspired a lot of David's Psalms. And if you don't know what a Psalm is, it's a song. A Psalm is a song written in the Hebrew context in the ancient times. And Chris Brown was just making the point that like you need to let your main source of inspiration be like God himself, which was like so striking for me because I relate to that a lot. Whenever I feel most in touch with God or like my higher power or whatever, and I'm just more aware of who he is, I feel really inspired to create. And most oftentimes it's to write about him, but it's often, honestly, like it does translate into tangible things of like new melodies and wanting to take bigger risks and be bolder with chords and harmonies that like I haven't tried before. I just want to go and create. And that has much to do with like my desire to reflect who I believe to be my creator is. But again, if you're not a Christian, this still applies in that I think the greater point is music is not going to be the main thing that always inspires you. Yes, we draw inspiration from other artists that like are doing a thing better than us, or that we deem to be better than us, but you may not realize you're also drawing inspiration. Like music and your inspiration doesn't exist in a vacuum apart from the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Much of your life actually influences why you create and how you create. Again, even down to the very melodies you choose.
Yep.
And so be aware of like what inspires you outside of music. Like, is it the birds in the air? Is it, the conversation you had with someone at a bar last night?
Love and heartbreak.
Love and heartbreak. Even the sad things, like the not beautiful, the not good things in life, but the hard things in life. Like, there's much of life to be observed that inspires you. And it may be happening subconsciously. I think the more you can tap into what is inspiring you, the more you'll be able to put to language what is inspiring you. And again, have it translate to tangible music that also blesses other people and that other people can relate to. This is why I think some of my favorite lyricists, like, they write lyrics that like really only apply to them and their story. And those exact words or situations may not have ever happened to me. And yet still, because they, in this weird, like, ironic way, because they only tried to put language to what their experience was and not tried to capture this broad net of people, I somehow relate to it more than ever. And so being aware of what inspires you in the world. I don't know if you have anything to say about that. But
yeah, channeling your experiences.
Yeah.
I think living a life where you have experiences is important.
Yeah.
There's a movie I need to make you watch. So
what is it?
I'm just thinking about that. Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Oh, I think I've seen it. It's been a minute though.
But the whole point is like he daydreams about these experiences that he wishes. I don't know if he wishes he can have. He just daydreams a lot. And then he starts actually living experiences and all the daydreams go away. And it's kind of like his life wanted to have some of these adventures and he just didn't know it or never went for it. So
totally.
Yeah, channeling your experiences. I think also going back to basing it on your revelation of who God is. I think the opposite way to approach writing, specifically Christian music, would be writing something because you think people want to hear it. And so I think that's if I were to make it really clear on what we're saying is healthy and what's not healthy.
Yeah.
Sitting down and saying, I want to write a song that my church is going to sing this weekend is probably not the right motivation. Yeah. Sitting down and saying, man, I'm writing a song about this that's happening between me and God, or this revelation I'm having of God. And I'm so happy I'm going to write it in a way that maybe can benefit the church. Yeah. But it's starting from that place of authenticity. The same thing with I'm not going to sit down and be like, I want to write about breakups, even though I've never had a breakup or whatever it is, I want to write about losing someone in my life, but I've never lost someone. It's like, no, you should write that song when you've had that experience, or if you've walked alongside some of that experience and you've lived it.
For sure.
I also think just in general, that's stories. When I read a book, I'm channeling someone else's ideas and experiences, and I'm living this journey through someone else's perspective. Yeah. It's I don't know what it's like to be Katniss and be in the Hunger Games, but you read those books, and you're
that's a good example.
I do feel what it feels like.
I'm there, right now.
Yeah, and that's the power of a story. And I don't know where those authors draw on those experiences to give us those stories, but that's the beautiful thing about someone else's story and us and getting to enjoy it and walk in their shoes a little bit.
Yeah. For sure. That Hunger Games example is so good. I freaking love that movie series.
Yeah. There's also a English professor I know at Liberty, and every year he makes his students read this story that's an awful story. It's cool. I think the husband or wife, one of them leaves the other for an affair, and they find
that's horrible.
They find all their joy in this new person, but then it blows up. It's just all this really sad stuff, and it's at a Christian school. So all the students why are we reading this story? And he's it enriches your life to see a spectrum of living. Yeah. Even though you might not agree with the choices that the person made in the story, just seeing how it plays out. For sure. Just opens your eyes to different things and different truths in life and how to treat people and respect people and maybe how not to. And so it's very interesting that thought.
Yeah. I love that. And I've always been about that with songwriters, capturing a holistic view of your life. I think some people for being more on the joyful side or being more on the sad, grieving side, you err too. And this is subjective in my opinion. This is not fact, but I see some people err only on one side.
Yep.
And I'm like, I know that this isn't your experience all the time. This is nobody's experience all the time. And so what would inspire me from those artists is seeing a more holistic view of their life, expressed in their music.
Mm-hmm.
Not that they have to, they can do whatever they want, but you might want to try that as a songwriter is talking through experiences in your music that you don't normally talk through and get out of your comfort zone. And going back to the church thing, it's not a bad, I want people to hear us clearly. It's not a bad desire to want to write songs for your church to sing.
1,000%.
It's just a misguided attempt to write a good song for your church to sing by thinking about
that first. Yeah, I think what you start with is really important.
Yes.
I think that's the thing. It's like, don't sit around and write songs for your church, but you don't open your Bible. You don't wrestle with these things out with God. Like, wrestle with some things with God and then let that inform
for sure
your writing.
Yeah. And even, let's say, like, you go to a relatively small church. Like, let's even say it's 100 people. You are not going to be able to capture the experiences of all those 100 people in one song.
No.
You would never be able to do that. And again, it's this ironic piece of when you just talk about your experience with God and you write what's true to you in that moment and not try to vicariously write about somebody else's experience that they might be experiencing. Ironically enough, those people relate a lot more to your one experience than you attempting to write about theirs. That's how anyone connects with a song. So, okay, a fun story that I think I heard from Josh Holiday, who's the producer.
Okay.
Is maybe I told you this already, but with so Elevation Rhythm, they have a song that's popping off right now. It's called Goodbye Yesterday. We've been doing it at our church and super thankful for it because it's a great first song to do. Start your service off. And everybody, if you're a Christian and like you're in the space, you know this song really well. They have this bridge.
Yeah. Big hits.
Decided, and that's kind of the part of the song like everyone kind of waits to get to. The rest of the song is great, but like that hits.
Yep.
That part wasn't originally in the song. It was another bridge that they had. And Josh Holiday told us about how it was like much slower. It was a lot more worshipful. And you honestly, it was like big and open. Like the drums kind of stopped.
Yeah.
And up until that point, you know that the songs are going.
Yeah. Very consistent.
And so when they did that and they tested it in the room of like their youth services or whatever, it like sucked the energy out of the room. And everyone was like, hey man, this don't hit. And so after a couple of times of trying it, they like rewrote the bridge to Goodbye Yesterday. And now it's like everybody's favorite part of the song. And I thought that was just a really cool example of like, hey, like sometimes it's okay to like experiment with things and, retry things and like rewrite. Like if it's not set in stone the first time around, it's okay. It's not the end of the world and it can be redeemed. And even I hadn't thought about this till just now, but so Gable Price, his younger brother, Jack Price, he also makes music and he makes really cool music. It's way different than Gable Price and Friends. It's like pop.
Yeah.
And like electronic. But he made a song and I'm forgetting what it's called. Super 8 is what it's called. And the song was, he submitted the song to a producer who I'm also reading about right now, but he submitted the song to a producer after he had released it. So it's been out. It's got like 80,000 streams already.
People are used to it.
Yes. And he sent the song for feedback and the guy's feedback was like very valid. And he was like, oh my gosh, like I hadn't thought about it. And he like re-released the song and now he's like much happier with it. And like he had to like restart the streams or whatever, but it was fine. I'm not saying everybody needs to do that. I am saying that there's a lot of beauty in like feeling okay if you don't get it right the first time.
Yeah.
And being willing to experiment and improve on the song. So
I think about like communication, like,
yeah,
because I think sometimes that might rub the wrong people because we just said, don't write just for thinking about what people like write based on your true experiences. But this is an example of like, you're listening to what the people are saying and you're making changes based off of it. It's like, we do the same thing with like preachers.
Yes.
Like a good teacher has said something multiple times.
Sure.
In multiple environments and they're getting feedback.
Yeah.
On did that make sense?
Right.
Did that work well? Did that deliver what you were trying to deliver? I think that's very valid because everything we're talking about is communication.
Yeah.
And how you communicate is one thing, but how it's received is another thing. And the best communicators aren't just thinking about their words.
Yeah.
They're thinking about the other person on the other end of those words. How are they going to interpret what they're saying?
Totally.
It's like this very complex game.
Yeah.
It drives my wife nuts a little bit because sometimes I'll tell her, like, if I make up a word, but you understood exactly what I meant by that word, it's valid.
And
she's like, but it's not a word. I'm like, but communication was successfully had.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's just part of what we're doing is we're writing truths that we've experienced or that God's revealed to us.
Yeah.
But sometimes we need to tweak those or change the music around them or change something because we really want it to get conveyed the way we thought it should get conveyed.
Yeah.
And changing the bridge with big hits and maybe different words and different melody might have conveyed their initial idea better.
Yeah.
So I think it's not having to be like, well, God gave me this song, so it has to be this way.
Yeah.
It's like,
Totally.
It could be, but it also couldn't be.
For sure. You just need to test all that, see if it's true.
Yep.
You'll learn soon enough. Shifting topics, I want to talk a little bit about what I learned specifically from Josh Holiday, who's the producer of Elevation. And Josh is just amazing. And it was just really cool to, like, he didn't know this coming into it, but like he's been a hero of mine for like the last 2 or 3 years now as a producer and just like advancing the sound of like worship music in like really cool ways. And I didn't tell him that at the front of the weekend because that would have been weird.
You're a little, yeah.
You
don't want to be fan.
No. So, but then like after we like developed a relationship, I got to tell him like, hey man, this weekend's been awesome. Been a super huge fan.
Yep.
That's a good piece of advice. Don't be weird when you first meet someone.
Don't be weird.
No. So the I didn't explain the layout of the weekend, and I don't really need to, but basically, there were 2 routes you could have taken as a participant. You could have taken the producer route or the songwriter route.
Gotcha.
I obviously took the producer route, which meant that it was me and like 6 other guys, and then most of the other people were songwriters, which meant that I got to spend the whole weekend with Josh pretty much. I didn't do any writing, so to speak, but I did do a lot of producing, and so it was really cool. Like the songwriters like wrote demos, and then we got to produce the demos and present it, and it was just a really cool experience.
Yeah.
But that's besides the point. I got to spend the whole weekend with Josh and just learn from him. And the first session was just us asking him questions, getting to hear from him. And he just kind of imparted a lot of like knowledge and wisdom. Here's what people, you want like, if you did like an internet search of Josh, which I had at some point, you wouldn't be able to like necessarily find this, but like he's worked with like a lot of like really big artists like in Atlanta and like a lot of like secular rappers that like everyone would know.
Yeah.
And now he's like with rhythm, and so it's just cool. But he started off his career in producing at like 17 years old.
Wow.
Which I started producing at 17, so that was wild. But yeah, so he had a crazy experience. His experience is very similar to mine. How he started off, where he was like, everybody in the neighborhood wanted to be a rapper, but nobody wanted to make the beats for the rappers.
Yep.
And I related to that a lot. But one of the things that he said that was really encouraging for me as a producer was, as a producer, I need to see myself also as an artist with the artists. So I think for a while, like when I first started off, I kind of saw it that way. And then I think I kind of became jaded through some of my poor experiences with artists where I really just felt like I had to submit and not really contribute creatively, but just be a task hand and do whatever I was told. And there are times where you just need to do that, and that's fine. That's fine. But I think I just forgot how important it is that I take creative ownership over what I'm doing with the artists.
Yep.
And that they need to feel that as well. And so there may be decisions that I make that they wouldn't otherwise make. And I'm learning this the more I work with like newer artists in particular, is like sometimes they're waiting on you to like make a call and like they're waiting on you to like try something new. Artists aren't always going to like have ideas. And I just felt permission by him to like be willing to like be invested in like the creativity of it all, not just be a task hand that's doing, whatever I'm told to do, but like contribute ideas again. And he was making the point we were asking him like, man, like, what do you do when you're working with artists and their songs that like don't necessarily inspire you? And he was like, man, like that is hard. Don't let your production be the reason why it's not a good song.
Yeah.
If it's not a good, well written song, if it's only like 50% good, like let the 50% be your production.
Yeah.
Like own it, take ownership of it. And even like, yeah. So that was just really encouraging for me to hear.
Yeah. I've always felt that about mixing because, you know, we work with a lot of different people and sometimes we're very excited about the music and sometimes it's like, oh, that's not something that I would get as excited about. But I've always felt like I know so much more about mixing than this artist does. That's why they're hiring me.
Yeah.
So it's my job to like give them all the tools that are available or the things that I think will really help them win. Regardless of how I feel about the song. Yeah. I think too, there's a little bit of figuring out who you're working with.
Yep.
So I think as an artist, it's okay to like be upfront with a producer and be like, hey, I'm going to have a lot of very specific ideas. Yes. And like, I really want to see my specific ideas come to life. Some artists are like, hey, I really want to lean on you.
Yeah.
I think that communication goes both ways.
For sure.
It's very helpful.
Some of the same artists could say from one song to another,
yep,
I want this.
Yep.
And then another song like, hey, you do what you do.
Yep.
So it is all very nuanced, but yeah, it was just cool to like be empowered in that way. I think he also like, I'm not trying to toot producers' horns, but I kind of am because I think this is really helpful for artists to know. Like, I forgot how important my role as a producer is and like how highly valuable it is.
Yep.
He was making the point of, and I think like I took this for granted only because it's just kind of like been my life and like this has just kind of naturally happened for me, like by the grace of the Lord. But like he was like, producers have to know how to do everything, like to some extent.
Yeah.
Like I have to know about engineering in order to be able to talk to you about it. I have to know how to, even if I don't know how to play an instrument, I have to know how to communicate with instrumentalists. I have to know how to coach an artist vocally. I have to know a little bit about songwriting. I have to know the history of music and like at least modern American music and how it's come together. Like I have to know a whole lot more. Conversely, a musician doesn't have to know about engineering.
Yeah.
A songwriter doesn't have to know how to communicate to a musician or doesn't have to necessarily know the history. An engineer doesn't have to know about like melodies and like, and so I have to be the glue that kind of like holds the song together. And like, that's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of beauty behind that and a lot of opportunity for like good. But he was like, man, like, he didn't say this personally to me, but he was just saying to us in general, like, don't sell yourself short. Like, your role is very, very significant and own it. Like, is what he was saying. And I was like, oh my God. Cause I have felt as of late, like in my own personal space, like just undervalued and like my role didn't matter as much, but it actually matters maybe the most in a song making process. And that was just encouraging to me. And it also just helped me to like keep a tab on like, oh, like I thankfully do know how to handle all of those areas of song making and I need to continue to grow in those things. But it was just a nice little like marker of like where I'm at and it was just encouraging. But producers matter.
Producers matter. I think that's one of the hardest things. I think we're getting better. For so long, I think for a really long time, we valued the artist the most.
Yeah.
Even more than the songwriter. So like what was valued the most isn't like who wrote the song or how the song was made. It was just like the end product that the artist performed. They got the credit.
Yes.
In everyone's eyes.
Yeah.
They might not have got the royalties, but they got the credit in everyone's eyes. I think we're moving into like a lot more songwriters are their own artists, which is kind of cool.
Which is great, yeah.
But because of that, I think the songwriter it gets a lot of credit for the song.
For sure.
And it feels like when you hear a finished song, you're like, oh man, that songwriter, like all these ideas and thoughts they had. It's like you don't know that like those might not have been their ideas and thoughts. And like you're saying, I think the back end side has been kind of not given its public spotlight, but it's starting to a little bit more and more, which is the producers, the mixing and mastering engineers. I mean, I even think like your marketing team, like there's so many pieces to this puzzle that make a project win.
Yeah.
And do really, really well. it's kind of like, again, a professional athlete, like an NBA player. It's like, yeah, they're great. They also have world-class trainers and like world-class dietitians. Genetics.
What was their background going?
Yeah. And like recovery specialists. Yeah. And then they have coaches that are like constantly trying to help them get better. And it's like, there's this whole team of people. And that's what people don't realize either, is the music they really love came from a team of people that all really care.
Right.
So it's foolish for us to think that like we can just be like an island, or that like our part is like the most important, the only part, the best part.
For sure.
They all have to serve one another and like work together with one another. So
yeah. And that brings me to another point. And this will be a briefer point because it goes back to what Elevation Rhythm, Worship said during their panel. But they just made the point of creation happens in community. Mm-hmm. And that was a biblical precedent set by God in that. And I'd never thought about this, but like with the Trinity, like they created the world together. Mm-hmm. And how I'd never connected that thought of how that translates to like us as, human creators. Like creation was meant to be done in team. Mm-hmm. You can write your own song by yourself. That's great. Like you can do that. But we fight against this. We tell people all the time, and we've said this on this podcast now, like, good luck trying to bring a song to its end by yourself. Like, it's possible. People do it. It's rare that it comes out as a quality product that would be better than an otherwise put together by a team song. So,
I mean, even in like our example, I'm a better mixing engineer because of you. Like, because I've worked with you a lot and you give me lots of feedback. And then if we work on like 5 songs together, you tell me like, hey, I noticed this theme over 5 songs, and like it forces me to tighten up my skills. I think I've made you a better producer because I'll tell you like, hey, here's like the production elements I feel like could be stronger. Yeah. And it's like, it's never fun to hear, but it makes us so much better. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm grateful that you've made me better. Yeah. Like, I would think you're grateful,
Yeah, I am. So, definitely.
Yeah. And we wouldn't have that if every time you made a song, you produced it, you wrote it, produced it, and you mixed and mastered it yourself. You'd be in a very different spot.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yes, very much so. And that applies also to artists and songwriters as well, where I get the opportunity, if they allow me to, like, I get the opportunity to give them feedback on their song while we're working on it. And even the other day, like, I was working with a girl, and she she even asked me, she's like, what do you think about the melody of the song? And I was like, I think you can improve on the chorus. Yeah. And so that doesn't mean we didn't get to work on the song. Yep. We got to continue working on it, but now she's going to go home.
And she's going to wrestle with it.
Rewrite the chorus, wrestle with it, and come out with a better song than it would have otherwise been if she had just tried to do it by herself.
Yeah. Or a stronger conviction on why she liked what she had.
Yes.
I think sometimes when someone gives you advice, the value in it might not be that you always bend to their advice. Yeah. But that you come away and be like, I really thought about it and I really like it this way, actually. Yeah. Yes. And I'm even more confident now than I was before.
For sure. Yeah. Yes. And I've felt that way about like my production. Yeah. And I've experienced that as well. So yeah, all in all, it was a really incredible experience. Last thing. This was really, really cool. It was weird, but like it made sense what he said once he said it. Josh Holiday, he said, I believe that a song speaks to you about what it wants. Mm-hmm. And at face value, you hear that and you're like, you're on some weird stuff, bro. Like, what are you talking about? But what he meant by that was a song is going to tell you when it's maybe had too many choruses, or a song is going to tell you when that melody doesn't work, or if this groove isn't hitting. And that's been my experience where I'm like, if I'm listening to a song, and basically it's just another way to say, when a song has gone on too long, you feel it. If you're listening intently, you feel when it doesn't need that pre-chorus, or if the bridge melody contour isn't hitting. Like you can feel it, and a song speaks to you about what it wants, and you just need to be listening. Yep. And I think that has a lot to do with like the producer, but also like in a songwriting process. I mean, this is a lot of what happens in a co-write is like when you're woodshedding a song, like there are a lot of really cool moments where like you guys all feel this thing about the song of like, yeah, this melody is not it. And you all come to agreement. And you may come to a disagreement, and that's fine. But I think there are a lot of really obvious moments when you're creating something and it speaks to you about like, hey, this ain't right. This ain't hitting.
The way that I think about it is if there's a part of a song that I don't find exciting, I start to think about that and like, why do I not find this exciting? When I've done production, a theme I've noticed is I usually feel really great come second verse, but getting to the second verse always feels like so draggy and takes so long. And I realized it's just because I wasn't putting enough attention to producing like a really exciting intro and like sweetening elements and like how it moves into the chorus. And it's like, man, but when it gets like the full band stuff, it sounds really fun. It's like, well, I need to start figuring out how to do a better job with that front section. And so for me, it's like if there's a part where you're like, I'm just waiting for this next part, that's a good sign of like, you got to go back and make every part captivating in some way.
Totally.
And not busy.
Yes.
But I think of like, exciting is a hard word. Captivating, inspiring. I don't know. I don't know the right word for
exciting
it.
Exciting is a good, Yeah. Exciting is a good word. Stimulating. I don't know.
Yeah. So that's my thought.
Yeah. So all in all, it was a really incredible experience.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it a lot. I'm super thankful for it. I felt super empowered.
Yeah.
And I left with a greater confidence in like my ability to create. And that, again, had much to do with their leadership and their encouragement. And I hope to be able to do that for other people now.
Yeah.
So,
some takeaways, I think, for our listeners, just from me listening to your experience is like, keep trying to learn.
Yeah.
Which I think if you're listening to this podcast, you want to learn, which is awesome. Continue to try to learn, continue to surround yourself with people that can teach you things, that can show you things. And then in other stances, like find ways to give back. Like give back to the next generation, to people coming up behind you. I think those are just very valuable things. And I think you did that very practically, which is very beneficial for you.
Yes.
But I think all of us need to keep doing that with our craft.
Yeah. Other things we touched on, know your identity, know where that is founded on, know what you're inspired by, or try to find things to be inspired by that are not just music.
Yeah. Dude, awesome, man. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Tweet.